Hello, Ari. So I'm Latasha with Awards Buzz, and
Hi.
I have been fortunate enough to interview quite a bit of the cast members from this series, and now you're next up. So
Yes.
first and foremost, how are you feeling today? Let's start there.
Thank you for asking. I have like a little bit of a headache that will not quite kick it, so I feel like a little bit like this, but I'm also very happy to be talking to you and happy to be talking about this project, which we love so much and is crazy. I realized that it was just over a year ago that I got home from shooting it. So it's fun to talk about again.
Yeah. Wait, so Ari, how long did the filming process take place? That was not the initial way that I wanted to kick this interview off, but
Well, we can segue. We don't,
yeah, I'm
but
all about a good pivot.
let's see. I got to LA. They started, I think, just sometime in December of, oh God, what year are we in? 2025.
Yeah.
So it was 20, so December of 23. I got there in January and then we wrapped like May 31st or June 1st or something of 2024. So it was about 6 months.
I always like to ask, like, prior to saying yes to, playing Leslie and really tapping into this project, were you initially familiar about the Menendez brothers story? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I knew sort of the very basic headlines. I had, the vague picture of them in their sweaters in court, but I was still pretty young when it happened. So I wasn't fully aware of Leslie. I didn't know any of the ins and outs of, the first trial, the second trial, really the depth of the history of their abuse. So there was a lot for me to discover for sure.
Yeah. What did
Yeah.
the research process look like for you? Like, how much time did you, dig into researching the past and the current state of where the case and the brothers stood, like leading up to stepping into those shoes?
Yeah. Well, it was all pretty wild timing because I auditioned for this the day before the actor strike. And then I got the offer the day the strike ended, which was the most unbelievable gift because like everyone I was sitting at home going like maybe this is it. Like I don't know what's going to happen unless I win the lottery, and then literally I felt like I won the lottery with this. And so whenever that, I can't remember now exactly what month that was, but almost immediately, I started reading what I could. The Robert Rand book was sort of a main Bible. And then Leslie wrote a book that she also did the audiobook for. And so that immediately became my North Star.
Oh,
And then, of course, reading everything, watching everything. I mean, I was more interested in going to the ends of the internet to find anything specific about Leslie. And so obviously there was a lot focused on the case, but I really wanted to try to have as many resources at my fingertips about her specifically, even if it wasn't from this trial, but about, you learn stuff when you see how other people see her, when you hear her in her own voice, you know, going back and reading articles that had been written about her even before the Menendez trial.
yeah.
So there were a lot of different John Gregory Dunn, who is Dominic Dunn's brother,
Mhm.
Nathan Lane, who plays Dominic Dunn in the show
Yeah.
so incredibly beautifully. John Gregory Dunn and his wife Joan Didion were best friends with Leslie. And John actually based a character in one of his books on her, so I read that. So it was really trying to understand her at the heart of it, and then also understanding the trial and getting into the nitty-gritty. But I also knew that the show wasn't necessarily going to be focused on the trial, so it was really wanting to have as much understanding as I could about the big pictures, but really specifically focused on her. And some of the the things that I watch the most that I think you forget about or I forget about in trials is there's like an hour and a half reel on YouTube that is all of this footage of Leslie in the courtroom, but in the interstitial moments, like when they're fighting for what gets to be admissible, when they're having conversations between both sides. I forget that there's so much more to a trial and a case than, just the kind of what we think of as being on the stand and the big moments of the case. So watching it
I
all.
think this is so interesting because it makes me also want to ask you personally, and of course, like professionally as well, which appealed to you most? Was it Leslie's story or more or less the, criminal defense attorney storyline?
Hmm.
That really, willed in that immense amount of interest and ultimately, which led to your yes, I'm stepping into these shoes. Yes, I will portray Leslie throughout this series. Like, which appealed to you more?
I mean, I think they both resonated to me and
Okay.
felt completely exciting in different ways. I mean, and first of all, Ryan Murphy, like when Ryan Murphy shows up and expresses interest, you're like, yes, please,
Yeah.
And the writing was so extraordinary, even just from the sides I had from the audition. It was, the first scenes I read were um, the first time that Leslie meets Erik in the jail, and she's sort of telling him all the mistakes they made, and then the scene with her at the adoption agency, which is the first time you meet her, and it was such a deep way of meeting her that you wouldn't have necessarily expected. And so it revealed to me quite early on, even before I knew I had the job, that there was a real whole woman there that we were going to get to explore within the context of this case. And she was incredibly powerful. And what this case was for the culture then, what it continues to be now, how ahead of her time she was. I mean, she was talking about the psychology of abuse and trauma in a way that people were not doing back then. And that was part of what made her job so difficult in the first trial, was she was trying to explain all of these theories that were not culturally held yet, like people didn't know. So I think stepping into both of those things, and then her spirit and her power and her charisma and her love, I felt very much that she had an incredible warmth to her, even underneath this sort of intense firecracker.
Yeah, and because the Leslie role was it was obviously very multidimensional, right? This is emotional. This is a real life story, but there also was like such boldness,
Mm.
that you brought forth that I'm sure back in the days, Leslie brought forth, like, listen, I'm coming in, I'm meaning, I'm standing on business, I mean business, like you had to play off both ends of the spectrum there. Was that at all difficult for you, leaning into the badassness of the role and also the emotional element, of the role
Yeah.
itself?
Yeah. I mean, I was really scared. I was really
Mhm.
intimidated and scared, and had to, a lot of my, there's all the work on Leslie and the work of doing this, and then there was also all of this sort of personal work that I was doing with myself, of working through my own um doubt or fear about stepping into her power. Which, the beautiful thing about being an actor is that when you're being asked to step into a character's power, you're also being asked to step into your own power. And I have it in me, but I also have much more of a noisy brain than Leslie does, or in a different kind of way that can doubt myself more in a more obvious way. And so I felt like this was such a gift of saying, this is an opportunity for me to meet myself in a place that I know exists, but sometimes I pull back from in my own life. And I think the desire to want to honor her
Yeah.
for her, for what she was as a woman in that time, I wanted to do her right in such a big way. And so that was both delicious and sometimes scary. And I think also just trying to find the modulations of that, of, where is that strength and that boldness, but that also has more life, that has life behind it, that is full bodied and rich with all of the things. Because as I learned when I read her book, regardless of how she appeared, she did have her own self-doubts and
Yeah.
insecurities and fears about being liked. And then I think on the emotional side, I think in some ways my biggest challenge was exerting a kind of restraint, an emotional restraint, which is that I had to remind myself that she listens to stories about the most awful moments in people's lives and in humanity as a whole. And there were parts of her audiobook that I would have to skip through at first because they were too hard. The stories were too hard to hear. And then I was like, I have to get used to hearing this. Like, I can't start crying every time I hear about some unbelievably awful, sad thing that has occurred. Like, I have to be able to hold that space the way she did. So I think modulating all of those things was,
Mhm.
um, a challenge and an opportunity.
And I feel so many times in Hollywood, people forget the fact that actors are humans.
Mm-hmm.
We idolize individuals such as yourself, which is well respected. Well,
Mm-hmm.
you deserve it, right? You
Yes,
put
I'm idolized all the time on a daily basis. Yes, just idol, idol, idol. Yes.
idolize. But I feel like we oftentimes remove the human element of things. So, I think that with a project that is so heavy and so layered and so compact, like humanly, Ari, like, how do you separate your moral judgment, your personal like opinions and thoughts about what the hell they went through? Like
Mhm.
this actually happened, right? And this is actually it's so crazy. Like it's literally still happening,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So how are you able to personally and professionally separate the morale in it
Mhm.
all and behind it all?
I discovered pretty early on while I was playing her and researching her, in some ways, that being an actor and being a defense attorney are not so dissimilar, in that a primary part of your job is not to judge the client and not to judge the character. And that's something that she talked about as such an essential piece of her work, is like, I'm not here to judge. That's not my job. Everybody deserves a defense. It is my job to find be in the most defense of my clients as I can. And I think in many ways, that's also true of actors. You can't judge your characters. You can't judge the worlds that they're in. Um, and so I think that that's something I really bring with me, or try to bring with me, to everyone I play. Sometimes that's harder than other times, although with Leslie it really wasn't. I felt like I was her defense attorney. Like, I
Mm.
believed in her. I love her. I love playing her. And then, though the show really was tackling all different points of view about this wild moment that ultimately only a few people were really there for, of course, I lived for a year as their defense attorney. So I felt very defensive of them as well.
Do you still hold on to that? Do you still like hold on to in some way, shape, or form, like the defense mechanism, what it is that they're still fighting through and
Yeah,
pushing?
I mean, I believe it's time for them to be out of prison. Um,
Mm.
I I think that in a larger way, a sentence for anyone of life in prison without parole is cruel and is outlawed in a lot of countries. Um, they've been in there for 35 years. They were, I don't have to go through the whole thing, but I believe and hope very much that it's time for them to be out for
I
all of
feel
them.
like this project has like
Hey,
not only,
Toots.
oh, I love it.
I'm so sorry. Hey, Tootsie. This is my dog,
Oh,
Tootsie.
I love it. I'm just like praying my little doggy
Toots.
doesn't bark.
I'm in the country, so like sometimes people drop by and they don't tell you, and you're like, "Hey,
Love
Toots,
it.
come here."
Listen, oh God, here's Nova. This is such a
Now
candid
is your
review.
dog starting to bark too? Is yours?
She's about to start. She hears Nova hears Tussie in the
Okay.
background. Just
Okay, Tootsie's coming back. She's chilled out. I'm so sorry.
no, it's perfectly fine because I'm sure our time is like coming to a close anyway. But I think after, playing Leslie, this criminal defense attorney, and saying yes to Ryan Murphy, saying yes to this series and this project, like how do you feel like it will continue to reshape the trajectory of your career, Ari's career as an actor?
Well, I mean, first of all, to get to play her, to get to play her in a Ryan Murphy world, and the way him and Ian Brennan and David McMillan write write characters, especially women, is extraordinary and a gift. And to be on Netflix and to be in something that people actually see. I was joking when this came out. I was like, wow, it's really something to be in something that people are actually watching. Like I've been in things that people watch, but it's a very different, it's a very different thing. So to me, it's like was a real kind of bucket list job, and I hope very much that it sticks with people so that I get to do something like that again. And it's a real honor, and I know, especially in this crazy world we're living in right now,
Yeah.
that it's not to be taken for granted. So I just feel incredibly grateful, and man, I really hope I get to do something wild like that again.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Before I let you go, Ari, what are you currently binge watching on television and what can we catch on your music playlist?
Okay, so I just watched Department Q, which I was really obsessed with. Matthew Good is so good. The show
Okay.
is so good. I also I do a lot of like building, renovating, sculpting, all of this stuff. And I just started watching the show that I'm obsessed with. I think it's via the BBC on Amazon, that's called Accidental Renovators, that are like a couple in their
Oh,
early 20s who accidentally bought this like house falling apart in Scotland, and they're in their early 20s and they redo everything.
oh wow.
So I'm really into that. And my playlist, it's so embarrassing, but I'm so bad about new music that I'm like, just I go to my Spotify and do like my liked songs, and most of them are, I don't know. Right now I'm into sort of like some like Italian disco from the 70s. Like it's a
Interesting.
real eclectic mix. It's that, it's some like Gigi Mason I love, and then it's like, oh, it's a real mix. I wish I had a cool new song to tell you
Uh,
about that.
Ari, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for
Thank you.
taking time out of your day and your schedule to chat with me. I
Thank you.
thoroughly enjoyed it. I think you are the best. I love your personality. I hope your headache goes away. And I
Thank
look forward to talking to you soon.
thank you. Me too.